PB Taxand Tax Updates. Disclaimer: the following information is intended only to be a guide. It must not be relied on in or applied to specific situations without previously seeking proper professional advice.
Amendment to the Provisions on Procedures for Preliminary Refunds of Tax Overpayments. The government has updated the regulations concerning preliminary refunds of tax overpayments through the issuance of Minister of Finance Regulation No. 28, Year 2026, which became effective on May 1, 2026. This update was introduced to improve accuracy in the implementation of preliminary refunds and to provide legal certainty regarding their application. This regulation revokes the previous regulation, namely Minister of Finance Regulation No. 39, Year 2018, as amended by Minister of Finance Regulation No. 119, Year 2024. One of the key focuses of the amendments under Minister of Finance Regulation 28 of 2026 is the adjustment to the eligibility criteria of taxpayers applying for preliminary refunds. There are three categories of taxpayers eligible to apply for preliminary refunds, namely certain criteria taxpayers, certain requirements taxpayers, and low-risk taxable entrepreneurs. A. Certain criteria taxpayers. Certain criteria taxpayers may apply for preliminary refunds of overpayments of both income tax and value-added tax, VAT. The criteria that must be satisfied are A. Timely submission of tax returns, consisting of 1. Annual tax returns for the last 3 fiscal years, and 2. Monthly tax returns for the January to November tax periods of the latest fiscal year. Where there is any late submission, such delay must not exceed 3 tax periods for each type of tax, must not occur consecutively, and must not exceed the filing deadline for the subsequent tax period. B. No outstanding tax liabilities, provided that 1. The payment deadline as of December 31st of the latest year has not been exceeded, except where approval for deferment or installment payments has been granted or the collection period has expired. And 2. The taxpayer has never made payments beyond the due date for settlement of tax liabilities for all types of taxes, including deferred or installment payments, within the last 5 years. C. Financial statements audited by a public accountant or a government financial supervisory institution with an unqualified opinion for 3 consecutive years, subject to the following requirements. 1. The audited financial statements must be attached to the annual income tax return. 2. The opinion must not constitute an unqualified opinion with explanatory paragraphs or modified unqualified opinion. 3. The financial statements must not constitute restated financial statements resulting from correction of errors or data manipulation, supported by a statement letter from the taxpayer confirming fulfillment of the financial statement criteria. 4. Any request for explanation of data and/or information concerning fiscal profit or loss that has been issued at least 3 months prior to the determination must have been responded to or discussed. 5. There must be no correction to fiscal profit or loss exceeding 5% based on audit for the last 3 fiscal years that has been agreed to by the taxpayer or has obtained final and binding legal force. And 6. The public accountant conducting the audit must comply with the 5-year audit rotation limitation, supported by a statement letter from the taxpayer confirming fulfillment of the financial statement criteria. And D. The taxpayer must have been registered and must not have been convicted of a tax crime within the last 5 years. Taxpayers may submit an application for designation as a certain criteria taxpayer no later than January 10th through the core tax system, directly, or through postal or courier services. The Directorate General of Taxes, DGT, will issue a determination decision within a maximum of 30 working days after the application is received. An application for a preliminary refund may be submitted for tax periods following the issuance of the determination decision designating the taxpayer as a certain criteria taxpayer. The DGT will conduct a review of formal obligations and an examination of the tax return. A preliminary tax overpayment refund decision letter shall be issued within a maximum period of 3 months for income tax or 1 month for VAT from the date the application is received. B. Certain requirements. Taxpayers. Certain requirements taxpayers may be granted preliminary refunds of overpayments of both income tax and value-added tax, VAT. The categories for certain requirements taxpayers are A. Individual taxpayers who do not conduct business or independent personal services and who file an annual income tax return reflecting an overpayment. B. Individual taxpayers who conduct business or independent personal services and who file an annual income tax return reflecting an overpayment of no more than 100 million Indonesian rupiah. C. Corporate taxpayers filing an annual income tax return reflecting an overpayment with 1. Gross turnover exceeding 0 Indonesian rupiah up to 50 billion Indonesian rupiah, and 2. An overpayment amount of no more than 1 billion Indonesian rupiah for a fiscal year or part of a fiscal year. D. Taxable entrepreneurs filing a monthly VAT return reflecting an overpayment, with 1. Total taxable supplies exceeding 0 Indonesian rupiah up to 4.2 billion Indonesian rupiah, and 2. An overpayment amount of no more than 1 billion Indonesian rupiah for a tax period. The DGT will conduct a review of the tax return in relation to the application for a preliminary refund, whereby a preliminary tax overpayment refund decision letter shall be issued within a maximum of 15 working days for individual income tax or 1 month for corporate income tax or VAT from the date the application is received. Under the previous regulation, there was no limitation on the amount of gross turnover or taxable supplies for certain requirements taxpayers. In addition, the maximum VAT overpayment amount eligible for a preliminary refund has been reduced from 5 billion Indonesian rupiah to 1 billion Indonesian rupiah. C. Low-risk taxable entrepreneurs. Low-risk taxable entrepreneurs conducting certain activities may be granted preliminary refunds of VAT overpayments for each tax period. Consists of 1. Exports of taxable tangible goods. 2. Supplies of taxable goods and/or taxable services to VAT collectors. 3. Supplies of taxable goods and/or taxable services for which VAT is not collected. 4. Exports of taxable intangible goods and/or 5. Exports of taxable services. The following types of taxable entrepreneurs are categorized as low-risk taxable entrepreneurs. A. Publicly listed companies, whose shares are traded on the Indonesia Stock Exchange. B. State-owned enterprises and regionally owned enterprises. C. Main customs partners. D. Authorized economic operator. E. Manufacturers or producers having production facilities. F. Certified pharmaceutical wholesalers. G. Certified medical device distributors. Or H. Subsidiaries of state-owned enterprises, with share ownership exceeding 50% as reflected in the consolidated financial statements. The requirements to be fulfilled by a low-risk taxable entrepreneur are as follows. A. Classified as one of the types of taxable entrepreneurs mentioned above. B. Having submitted monthly VAT returns in a timely manner during the last 12 months. C. Not currently subject to an open preliminary evidence examination and/or investigation of a criminal offense in the field of taxation. And D. Not having been convicted of a criminal offense in the field of taxation within the last 5 years. A taxable entrepreneur must submit an application to be designated as a low-risk taxable entrepreneur through the core tax system, directly, or through postal or courier services, with the designation decision to be issued no later than 15 working days after the application is received. The DGT will conduct a review of formal obligations and a review of the monthly VAT return in relation to the application for a preliminary refund. One of the amendments introduced under this regulation is the imposition of a minimum threshold for certain activities, namely, at least 80% of the total value of 1. Supplies of taxable goods and/or taxable services, excluding VAT-exempt or non-VAT supplies, and 2. Exports of taxable tangible goods, exports of taxable intangible goods, and/or exports of taxable services in the tax period for which the preliminary refund application is submitted, including at the end of the financial year. A preliminary tax overpayment refund decision letter shall be issued no later than 1 month after the application is received. D. Other provisions. 1. A taxable entrepreneur categorized as a certain requirements taxpayer shall no longer be treated as a low-risk taxable entrepreneur for the purpose of applying for a preliminary refund. 2. Taxpayers, certain criteria taxpayers, certain requirements taxpayers, and low-risk taxable entrepreneurs may resubmit an application for a preliminary refund in respect of the remaining amount of tax overpayment that has not yet been refunded through a separate application letter. Such separate application must be submitted before the DGT commences a tax audit or an open preliminary evidence examination, and no later than 2 years prior to the expiration of the statute of limitations for tax assessment. 3. Where a certain criteria taxpayer that is also categorized as a low-risk taxable entrepreneur applies for a preliminary refund of an overpayment reported in a monthly VAT return, the procedures for the preliminary refund shall be carried out under the following provisions. A. For tax periods other than the end of the financial year, the procedures applicable to low-risk taxable entrepreneurs shall apply. B. For the tax period at the end of the financial year, the procedures applicable to certain criteria taxpayers shall apply. 4. In the event that, based on the results of the review of the preliminary refund application, no preliminary tax overpayment refund decision letter is issued, the tax overpayment refund application shall be processed in accordance with Article 17b of the General Tax Provisions and Procedures Law through a tax audit. 5. The DGT may conduct a tax audit on taxpayers that have obtained a preliminary refund and may issue a tax assessment letter based on the results of such audit. E. Transitional provisions. For certain criteria taxpayers who filed an application for preliminary refund before Minister of Finance Regulation 28 of 2026 became effective, and where a tax overpayment payment order letter has not yet been issued, the settlement process shall be subject to the new provisions, namely Minister of Finance Regulation 28 of 2026. On the other hand, for certain requirements taxpayers and low-risk taxable entrepreneurs who filed an application for preliminary refund before Minister of Finance Regulation 28 of 2026 became effective, the settlement process shall be subject to the previous provisions, namely Minister of Finance Regulation 39 of 2018, as lastly amended by Minister of Finance Regulation 119 of 2024. With the enactment of Minister of Finance Regulation 28 of 2026, any designation of certain criteria taxpayers granted under the previous Minister of Finance regulation shall no longer be valid. Accordingly, taxpayers previously designated as certain criteria taxpayers are required to resubmit an application for designation as certain criteria taxpayers. Such application may be submitted from June 1, 2026 until June 10, 2026, or no later than 10 January. A new designation decision shall be issued within 30 working days from the date the application is submitted, provided that the requirements under Minister of Finance Regulation 28 of 2026 are fulfilled.
Thank you for listening to PB Taxand Tax Updates.